lifestyle that right to mindful utilization of our resources. This initiative advocates collective action to encourage individuals, worldwide climate friendly practices. This Republic Day in 2025 makes them into the inspiring story of Halkar village community in Karnataka, northern Karnataka. For a century, they have successfully managed their forests, offering a valuable lesson on sustainable forest management and resisting the pressure from the forest invasion. So, join us to explore how we can all contribute to more harmonious relationships with nature with our professor in Subash Chandran. Sir is an experienced consultant with a demonstrated history of working with environmental services. He speaks in sustainable development, biodiversity, environmental awareness, and education and natural resource management. She is a PhD in forest ecology and vegetation of nature. Also, he has worked in areas related to ecological history, sacred groves, vegetarian ecology, etc. Karnataka State, he has received Karnataka State Rajya Sabha Award in 2020 for the sector environment and education. Through today's discussion, we aim to extend our understanding of forest ecosystems, their significance in local communities, and how we can collectively work towards the future which of our natural heritage for a sustainable future. I encourage all the participants to actively engage their forestry heritage and coming to the chat box to reach the now I welcome the users to enrich us with this class. Over to you.
Good evening. Welcome to all dear participants. So I'm just apologizing for the little delay in starting due to some technical reasons. So the topic which I am going to deal with today is much to do with environmental history and traditional management of environment. So we are taking case study of one village in the Karnataka state, Uttara Kannada district, in the Taluk of Kumta. The village is called Halkar, and it is a coastal village, and the topic is survival through ages. Lessons for forest imperialism from the humble village community of Halkar in South India. Now you can see where Halkar, the Uttara Kannada district, is in Karnataka, in the central west coast. The district has a coastal zone. Then there is a Western Ghat zone. Western Ghat, the dark green is high evergreen area, high rainfall area, and the lighter green is lesser rainfall, and the yellowish is very low rainfall. All belong to Uttara Kannada district. It has got all the varieties of habitats ranging from coast to mountains and eastern plains bordering the Deccan Plateau. Now, if you see the geological map of the Uttara Kannada district, now it is on the shore of Arabian Sea, and you can see that it has a lot of laterite hills, laterite formation along the coast, and sometimes in the interior also a little bit, but predominantly the coastal zone is having lot of laterite formation, which is a more a surface rock, and this is the brown part is the Western Ghat, typical Western Ghat composition. This is a mostly granite rock, and where the rivers are flowing, like uh, Aganashini, then Gangavali, Kali, they have along their banks alluvial deposits. Now, how this coastal laterite is formed is a mystery. This has something story going back to the separation of Indian peninsula, Indian subcontinent from Madagascar, which happened something around 88 to 90 million years ago. So both these land masses split, and okay, we got the vertical side on the western side, and Madagascar got its vertical split region on the eastern coast. So we have our long rivers like Kaveri and Tungabhadra and all flowing to the east. They have their long rivers flowing to the west. Now just imagine, we got a vertical wall, and from there, through almost 88 million years or so, water has been rushing down the steep slopes, and in the course of these so many millions of years, what would have been happened is erosion and deposit along the coast, which created a coastal zone, along with the alluvium brought by the river and also by the sea sand. We got a coastal zone. Now, the Halkar village is situated in the coastal zone rather than in the Western Ghats. See, the waterfalls like Jog and several waterfalls are falling vertically towards the west. Now, it was in 1799 that Tipu Sultan, under whose regime the Canara, including Dakshina Kannada, Uttara Kannada, formerly North Canara, they all belonged at one time to Tipu Sultan's domain. And in 1799, Tipu Sultan was defeated, and the land, Uttara Kannada, entire Uttara Kannada, Mysore, all this South Karnataka came under the rule of the British. In 1801, Colonel Wellesley, the Governor General of India, British India, sent Francis Hamilton Buchanan to take an account of the newly conquered areas, which include Malabar Coast, Canara, Mysore Territory, all that. So Buchanan had to pass through all these places and describe how they are, how they were in those days. So Buchanan made his travelogue, which has the earliest ecological data. In 1801, he traveled through Uttara Kannada, and you can see here, he went along the coast, and you can see those black stones and all, laterite it is. And he was actually very surprised to see extensive formations of laterite rocks on the coast. Actually, there is a rainfall of more than 350 centimeters per year. But yet, there was some desertified terrain which look like a very arid place, and rocky laterite rock. So actually it was Francis Buchanan who for the first time described what is a laterite, how it is formed and all that. Now you see, when we look at this expanse of laterite, it is a very hard indurated rock. Now actually these laterite hills are flat. They are like plateaus or very, very gentle moving slopes. Now, how it happened, we must first remember that coastal Karnataka is more a deposit of the Western Ghat. Laterite is not from a parent rock, but from the deposited soil, which is a mixture of things like quartz, nickel, iron, manganese, all those things, along with clay and other fine soil particles. In the course of very, very heavy rains, these finer particles get washed away, leaving only a hard indurated laterite, which is rich in usually manganese and iron, and even sometimes mining was done. But when you look at these laterite expanses in the rainy season, you find it is very picturesque, full of herbs, and even several rare herbs are present. And it is mainly these plateaus in the rainy season are main feeding grounds for the honeybees. When forests are not in flowers, most of the forest trees and forest shrubs, herbs, they flower only after the rainy season. So, but laterite plateaus will be blooming. And remember, at the time of British conquer in 1799, there was nothing like an organized forest department. Certain valuable wood was the property of the rulers, like sandalwood, teak, and a few other things. The rest of the things could be used by the people, and people also cleared small patches of forest, especially those who are dwelling in the hill areas. They did shifting cultivation by slashing and burning, and then they will keep places, and where they abandoned the previous cultivated area, in the course of years, again forest grows there, favored by the tropical seasonal monsoon rains which exceed 300 centimeters per year. So the secondary vegetation fill the barren areas in course of time, and then the secondary vegetation will have more deciduous species, but the evergreen species will find favorable localities in the shade of these deciduous for regeneration. So Francis Buchanan wrote, there were along coast some majestic forests also. Not all barren area. These areas were interrupted by some of the majestic forests. They were called by him as peppercorns or menasukans in Kannada. So in a can, later we found a can forest means it is a sacred grove. It was a sacred grove historically. The people never cut the can forest in the pre-colonial past, and even today the local village gods have their predominant presence in the can forests, which were not much disturbed because they were dedicated to the village gods. Now, no tree should be cut in the can forest except having permission from the Gauda. Gauda means the headman of the village. So he has to pray to the god and get the permission. idol receives nothing, but if the ceremony is neglected, then the, it used to bring the wrath of gods as per the village community people. So much of forests were seen with high regards, high reverence. They were preserved, never cut, and these Khan forests are the remains of primary forests of the Western Ghats. They have high degrees of endemic species, both plants and also animals, including microorganisms, diatoms, newer and newer species are being found, investigated, and the trees are large. The emergent trees exceed 30 meters height. They are often with buttresses, and also many growing in wet areas have stilt roots. And here you can see uh, the local youth protecting their sacred grove. It was, the photo was taken about 20 years ago, and this particular sacred grove has Vatiria indica trees, which is considered endangered species of Diprocarpaceae, and also Syzygium travangoricum, critically endangered species. All this within 1 hectare area of the Khan forest, which is shrunk today from earlier, we don't know how much area it was covering. And there was, before the forest department, there was a pre-colonial landscape. See, people were living in a dense forest all around, and but when agriculture came around 3000, yeah, almost 3000 years ago into Western Ghats, and with cattle to rear, people required grasslands. So some forests were cut, especially along the coast and all, and burned, and the open conditions favored fodder grasses. These landscape elements are called Bena fodder lands. Then the sacred groves, as I explained, they were forests dedicated to the village gods, and there will be also savanna areas with trees interrupting grasses, and the savanna areas and secondary forests were utility forests. People collected the dry leaves for agriculture. Organic farming was the most predominant. Even today, Uttara Kannada farmers mainly rely on organic farming. So there was no taboo on collecting leaf manure from secondary forests, but not from primary forests, the sacred groves. And the valleys were occupied by agriculture, the spice gardens, the pepper was renowned from early historical times. Pepper was even exported to Europe and Arabs and Chinese and all that. Now, the landscape, often in the Midwestern Ghats, you can see grasslands alternating with forests. And these forests in the grooves of the mountains, they were protected. They are evergreen, and they are, most of them will be having streams, and these network of streams join to form rivers flowing west or flowing east. And this particular area is the catchment area of river Sharavati river, which is the major contributor for hydroelectricity in Karnataka. Almost 40% of Karnataka's hydropower comes from Sharavati. Now, I told you how forests were protected as sacred. See, what happens? Uttara Kannada district or North Kannada district came under the domain of the British, and it was merged with the Bombay Presidency. Whereas the Mysore territory, including Shimoga, Chikmagalur, Hassan, all these came under the king of Mysore, who was restored by the British after the defeat of Tipu Sultan. So these Saurabh, Sagar, Tirthahalli, Vasanagar, these areas in the Western Ghats, these taluks are Western Ghats taluks, and there the conservation tradition was very strong. The village communities, even under the Mysore kings, protected in every village a substantial forest area as a sacred grove. It was called Khan forest, and the surrounding area called Kadu. Kadu is ordinary forest. From Kadu, biomass can be gathered, wood can be cut for house building or furniture, leaf manure can be collected for fields and plantations, gardens. So in Saurabh Taluk, what today you see all these dark patches, most of them were the sacred forests of the pre-colonial times. And these were fireproof areas. It was no person lesser than Brandis, D. Brandis, who was the first Inspector General of Forests, the IG of Forests of British India. In 1868, I think the Malnadu and the Karnataka people, Karnataka state itself would have been fortunate. The IG of Forests came personally to survey the Khan forests of Shimoga district, especially Saurabh Taluk. There is a report also. 1868, he found 13,000 hectares were under Khan forest. Means 13,000 hectares were sacred forests in Saurabh Taluk today. Like that, Tirthahalli also had. All these Malnadu districts had sacred groves, very large ones, and not just 1 acre or half acre like, but several hundred acres. This is Hale Saurabh Khan. This was more than 1,000 acres. Even today, the area is so much, and in between, deciduous forest, then savanna, grassland, agriculture. The Khan forests were at little higher elevations. In any village settlement, the Khan sacred grove will be occupying the higher spot, and there no tree was to be cut as per the tradition prevalent. And that was the main source of water, streams. Then streams running to the streams blocked in the valleys. They became big ponds, and these ponds were used for irrigation purpose. Streams were also directly used for irrigation purpose. So there was decentralized system of this water services to the community, to the villages. There was no centralized dams and pipe water supply and all that. Water was plentiful, but Brandis and Captain Grant, who together surveyed, they wondered why these Khan forests were not catching fire, whereas surrounding forests with a lot of leaf-shedding species, deciduous species, were catching fire in the dry summers, but the fire will stop once it reaches a Khan. So the fire didn't endanger human lives there as it is doing otherwise in all the colonial places, colonial countries like United Nations, USA, Canada, Australia, then part of, bulk of South America. There you find devastating fires. But here in the Western Ghats, similar culture prevailed all over the Western Ghats. So Western Ghats, you don't find such a devastating fires. So for the reason, we have to look into the history. See, the evergreen forest will never burn, and most of them in till recent times were remains of primary forest with high degree of endemic species among vegetation, among the amphibians, among the fishes in the streams, even insects, like that. So no fires enter the evergreen forest. The cons, leaves, branches, and fallen trees accumulate, gradually decay, forming a rich surface layer of vegetable mold. Such a ground cover is very favorable for absorption of water like a sponge from the torrential rains, store the water, and then release gradually. That is where the Sharavati river originates in such area, and then the part of Tungabhadra originates by the side of these taluks, and they were all well known for their perennial water availability. Now, see, whether it be Swarab Taluk or Sagar Taluk or Vasnagar Taluk, you can see these dark areas are khans. Around them, these are all fields in the valleys, and then the water sources will be there. Even today, you can make out these are the remains of the khans, and if you go and visit, invariably there will be a deity, one or more deities inside the khan. Whereas the dry forest catch fire, usually it's a ground fire. So the fire was controlled, it was controlled fire, and the fire leaving the ground charred favored enrichment of the soil with ashes and favored cultivation, and also the deciduous forests, secondary forests were rich in timbers necessary for house construction and other carpentry works. So lot of these Western Ghat tribes like Devalis, Gaulis, Anbars, Kunubis, Malakudiyas, Mudugars, so many of them, all of them had shifting cultivation history. They were shifting cultivators in the past until the British prohibited shifting cultivation, slash and burn cultivation by the end of the 19th century, and then they were forcefully to become stationary cultivators. So, see, if you see some of the trees there in the Khan forest, we found many trees which are endemic and endangered. For example, Gymnocrandera canarica of Myristica swamps, the wild nutmeg swamps in the Khans. See, this is how dense Khan forest of Katale Khan. A new species was described from Katale Khan, a plant tree related to mango, and that is called Semicarpus Katale Khanensis. So here, most of the trees, like say for example, this is a Gymnocrandera canarica. This belongs to nutmeg family, where its relatives are there. You find in African tropical forest, New Guinea in the Pacific Ocean, in Malaysian area, then in South America also you get a nutmeg family. But today, thousands of kilometers wide oceans and seas separate these pieces of these land masses from each other. That shows even before the continents split apart, broke, and drifted from each other. Even before the Atlantic was born, the nutmeg family had evolved in the Gondwana land. So today it is also an evolutionary relic that we have such species in the our Western Ghat forest, but unfortunately the significance of this was not known much to the forest management. So these, when the timber trees were exhausted, much like teak and rosewood and all that by the British, and when we under the government of India, under the state forest department, lot of natural forests were cleared for raising monoculture of teak, which was extremely harmful for the Western Ghat ecology. And but still, some Khan forests were protected, and there you find high endemic trees and very much water, swampy conditions in the ground, and they are the relatives are found in different tropical countries of the world. So now, Professor Madhav Gadgil and myself surveyed 25 square kilometers of area in Siddhapur, flat areas, flat and undulating areas. So there were some 7, 8 villages were covered in that, and we collected details about what is the current land use and what was the land use in the past, and we started making maps. So by questioning the community, we came to know what was the original area of the Khan forest in that particular village. How many Khans were there? What was the name? How much area is having that name? Then that's called Khan, or means ordinary forest, where tree could be cut. Mostly they are deciduous forest. Grass and weeds will be growing underneath. Then shifting cultivation areas. Then grassland, bena for cattle grazing. Then fields, gadde, bailu and all. Then ponds and streams and hamlets and miscellaneous uses. Altogether, we found Khans and benas on a conservative estimate. It covered nearly 6%. But Brandis and Grant found 13% of Sorab Taluk was under sacred groves, but it was never admitted by the British that Khans were sacred forests. Now, this is coming to the coast. This is the estuary of Aghnasni River, west flowing river from the Western Ghats, flowing through Uttara Kannada district, and from originating in Sirsi and Siddhapur mainly, and then rushing down the steep mountain slope through the Unjalli Falls, and then flowing short course towards the Arabian Sea, and it meets about 18 kilometers away. It meets the salt water from here. So this all estuary, and this Aghnasni River has no dam. So it is almost a river in its more or less pristine condition. No factories, no major township except Kumta town a bit away. But there are lots of villages all around, and the Ghat section here. And this Aghnasni, which is a natural river, as we studied the river, and we find about 80 species of estuarine fishes, at least 80 species. We could name them, and our researchers made a detailed study, and then there are several species of edible bivalves and a lot of mangrove areas, and more than 120 species of birds. Out of them, about 40 to 50 species are water birds, which come from different countries, different continents, and migratory birds. And because of the predominance of seasonal migratory winter visitors and other bird richness and other sustainable use of ecosystems, unpolluted nature of the river and estuary, Aghnasni has been declared a Ramsar site of the world. So in India, it was declared last year the Ramsar site. So I thank all the researchers, scientists who have contributed for this from the time of Professor Madhav Gadgil. He worked here about almost 25-30 years ago, and continued for up to 15 years ago, he was very much impressed by this landscape, the people, the communities, the human ecological studies he made, his students made, some got a PhD from that. And so now we come to one of the coastal forest, which has been preserved. It's on the bank of Aghnasni estuary, the Halkar forest, Halkar village forest. See, it is very close to Kumta town. It is on a laterite terrain. So the higher part is having very hard laterite and the slope is having also laterite boulders, and the lower little plains have some fields and human habitations all here. This is Halkar village, which has almost 220 acres of forest. Now, today also the forest is retained by the Halkar village community. What's the reason? When the coastal zone of Karnataka, especially Uttara Kannada, from Bhatkal to Angola in the north, remain more or less barren with tree growth and scrub growth here and there. So the forest department in those days, mainly depending on commercial forestry, British forest department, they were more after teak and rosewood and terminalia and nandi trees and such timber trees rather than on other scrub and low statured trees growing on laterite plateaus. So then the question arose, why the forest department should be paying employees and protecting this coastal forests along the degraded laterite hills by expenditure, by why not reduce the expenditure and hand over all this to the revenue department. Then Collins, GFS Collins, Forest Settlement Officer of Canberra, was appointed to make a study of all these coastal areas just to see whether there is any worth in conservation, whether it is economic or whether we should hand over all these to the revenue department. So after this study in 2021-22, 1921-22, Collins submitted the report. So better not to hand it over to revenue department because there are so many villages here along this coast who have protected forests. Even on a harsh laterite terrain, they have protected forests, and so therefore it is better we, under the Indian Forest Act prevalent then, to make councils of villagers and hand over these forest patches to them for management. So according to the Indian Forest Act, some committees were constituted, especially in Kumta Taluk in 8 villages, and one was Halkar, the 7 were other villages. So these committees, they have a structure that's called under Indian Forest Act Village Forest Panchayat, VFP, not Village Panchayat Forest. It is a Village Forest Panchayat. And similar we find in Uttarakhand and Uttaranchal, Himalayas also, they are called Vana Panchayats. So they were also constituted under the Indian Forest Act prevalent then, but in Uttara Kannada, Halkar was declared a village forest panchayat in the year 1924. Means 2024, it completed 1 year. And so we were from CES and also Professor Madhav Gadgil's and Dr. TVRAMACHANDRA's initiative, we were up to the village community to celebrate the centenary and the village community obliged, and yeah, centenary was, yeah, celebrated in a very gaily manner. So it was a 3 days bash celebration and well attended. So, and our team thought of making detailed study of the Halkar village forest, ecological study, and see what are the plants from herbs to trees, and how many trees are per hectare, what is the basal area, what's the biomass, all these calculations, and how best the forest can be improved by better management policies and resource use. Now, historically, Halkar forest was under an informal committee, but in 1924, village forest panchayat was constituted, and there is a watchman also for that. There is a secretary, there is a president, there is a community-wise representation, and so it was a more or less democratic body. So there are many minor animals there like jackals. Hyena used to be there, but now not found because everywhere else town is growing, villages are growing in population. Hare, langur, wild boar, panthers used to visit occasionally earlier, but again recently panthers have appeared and so many birds. And remember, Halkar village is on the bank of Aganashni estuary, so it is also having a share in the estuary. Part of the village is under estuary, so part of the village is covered by Ramsar site. So Halkar is truly a village that has a claim on the management and policy making of the Ramsar site. So almost 200 households constitute a general body of Halkar Village Forest Panchayat. They are members. And as per constitution, they elect a managing body of 9 members. And you know, there is a communal representation here. In those days, it was prescribed because every strata of society get a representation. For example, Harikandras, they are fishermen, they were fishing community. So the panchayat should have representation of fishing community, farmer community, potter community. Then one seat is given for the others, Brahmins and the Harijans for the which belong to the scheduled caste group. They also have one seat reserved. This 9-member committee, every member is equal, and one is chosen as the president, and so that's a constitution. There is a secretary is also appointed by the committee, and he is paid a little honorarium. So I told you Halkar has a democratic system, and how this system functioned through ages. Remember, village forest panchayat was constituted 100 years ago, but the forest was there from time immemorial ever since agriculture started. So each household is given a pass on payment of a small fee, annual fee. So one member from the household is allowed to gather fallen leaves for manure and dry wood for fuel. A pass holder can collect only 1 headload of fuel, that too dead and fallen, or dead branches broken by hand. No one is allowed to carry axe or knives to cut for fuel purpose. Fallen leaves collected only during the dry season for manure purpose. So these village communities save lot of money, lot of effort. Otherwise, for their manure purpose, fuel wood purpose, they have to go far into the forest elsewhere. They have to devote days and days for collection. And also then what happens, the, such villages will gradually corrode the quality of those forests, whereas Halkar people do not go to the Western Ghat forest for collecting anything. It is a self-sustaining system to this day, and every house, the leaf manure collection season, there is a limit. One head load is 25 to 30 kg. No vehicles are allowed to carry that. Green ticks are collected only from bushes, and that too from the during the rainy season. But the wild fruits, edible ones, medicinal plants, all this can be gathered freely without any payment. There are also some economic products like surgi flowers for use for perfume, then the kokum fruits, and these are auctioned to any village person who is ready to take that, not to outsiders. Firewood is not to be taken out of this village. Leaf manure is not to be taken out of this village. For the residents of Halkar, Halkar is a very sacred land, and they never cut a tree, that is a live tree. So there was a crisis in 1970s because reserve forests under the state government in the Western Ghats were already depleted of timber, plywood, matchbox timber, match factories, packing case timber, softwoods, hardwoods over, and then softwoods also merely logged, and then nothing much was left. So the eyes fell on Murur Kalabe village Panchayat forest, which is also very close by. The forest is something like nearly 2,000 acres area, and they had even Khan forest inside, which was recorded by the British. The Khans were having even pepper vines, but the British had given contract for collecting pepper, but the forest settlement officers objected to it. The contractor would be cutting and dragging the pepper vine itself, then collecting the pepper. So the forest settlement officer gave strict instructions for protection of the village forest. But when there was a depletion of timber after industrial logging, widely affecting the Western Ghat, particularly Uttara Kannada forest, then some companies were given logging contract in Murur Kallabe village forest Panchayat, also in Kumta Taluk. And the contractors came, started cutting the trees. The people objected that this is our village for Panchayat forest, village forest Panchayat, so you can't cut. But then there was a crisis. The administration said, no, this is under the Bombay presidency rule. This is a Karnataka state, Mysore state then. So you have to surrender all the rights, the privileges given in the forest to the government, hand over the forest like that. But there were 8 village forest panchayat in Kumtai alone. 6 of them surrendered. Halkar and Murur Kalabe went to the Kumta court. They lost, and then they went to the High Court also. In the High Court, after a prolonged legal battle of almost 10 years, the court favored the continuation of village forest panchayat. But in the meanwhile, this time lapse found dissolution of Murur Kalabe village forest panchayat system, and Khans collapsed. There is a degradation in the forest around. But Halkar stands alone as a classical case of how communities can successfully manage the forest resources. And it is not only for India a model, though it is a very humble place, it's a model for the world itself. Come to that. So the centenary was celebrated with much pomp. The minister came, fisheries and minor ports minister, and even Dr. TVRAMACHANDRA and Dr. Ratna. They especially came for this function from Indian Institute of Science, and you can see where some cut portion is there. See the soil. Once you remove the top laterite, the soil is very rich. You can make out it is just Western Ghats soil. If laterite is broken, you get such soils underneath. So there is a lot of fertility, a lot of scope for improvement of the forest ecosystem here. And certainly there are big trees like Karelia, Integrima, then this, like, Disoceram, sorry, this, I think I forget, this is a Syzygium, Cumini, and secondary forests also are there. All forests are not good forest because these were once under flat areas. Today also flat area, but they were used for grazing and all. But the forest department some years back planted a lot of acacia trees in between. So suddenly the grazing area grows the grass, no more grows in that. But acacias have grown much. So this is a view of the forest. Now this is the indurated laterite surface where no tree can grow in this. But if you break this laterite, underneath there will be such soil. Trees are mostly stunted. Where soil is more, we find taller trees. So we are studying, making ecological studies of this thing. They are going on. Now, okay. So today, you see, the world is ravaged by wildfires. Canada, European countries, Russia, Australia, USA, like that. And they are not necessarily human caused fire, but even thunderstorms, lightnings can create fires. And the United Nations have taken note of global indigenous fire practices, fire protection practices to control. Fire practices. See, before the European colonists reached America or Australia or Africa, such places, they were under indigenous communities, local communities were managing. Australian aborigines used fire to create a mosaic landscape for hunting and gathering purpose. See, you need grassland for grazing animals and also to continue to break the continuity of fuel. If there is continuous forest, what happens? The deadwood falls, dead leaves fall, maybe once in 10 years, one lightning, and the whole forest burns thousands of kilometers together, as it happened a couple of years back in Australia. One of the world's largest wildfire was witnessed. Even now, wildfires are happening. And the Canadian First Nations means the indigenous peoples, Canadian indigenous people used fire as a way of managing their territory. How these all people lived in dense forest areas, but they cleared forest, they either cultivated or taken care of the wild plants. For example, in California, the oak forests were cut in stature to shorter height in patches. That the oak fruit, the oak seed, acorn called, it is very rich in starch, and the indigenous people collected that starch, this thing, crushed and dried and stored it, and it was major source of starch food. Then water was plenty, the fishing was done in streams and rivers, and there was no commercial exploitation of timber, but fire was controlled because at every human settlement, fire will stop. There were hundreds of indigenous tribes living in Canada, USA, and South Mexico, South America, like that. So they had either cultivated or taken care of the wild forest, tamed the forest to their use, and it was very sustainable. And so wildfires, as you know, are affecting millions of acres. Even now, wildfire is raging in Californian forest. Now you see, many mountain areas are coming in the biodiversity hotspots. 36 biodiversity hotspots in the world. Out of them, we have Western Ghats, Sri Lanka, and also Himalayas and this northeast area form one hotspot. And see, California is also a hotspot. Today, really a hotspot with several fires. These fires were not happening under the local tribes, indigenous tribes. But what happened when the Europeans conquered this place? These tribes were mercilessly expelled from these forests. These tribes had their land use areas, their oak collection areas, their fishing areas, their other NTFP collection areas. Their gods also were in the forest. So what you see is those very mighty redwood trees, some of them having witnessed Egyptian civilization and even Indus civilization, such trees dating back to 2,500, 3,000 years. They were sacred groves of those indigenous people. But when they were expelled, thousands of kilometers were brought under the European forestry, first by Spaniards, the Spain people. Spains were defeated. Then the British Americans became dominant, but they also cut these huge timber trees for building American cities, carrying the timber to Europe for sale and for building palaces in Europe. And like that, forests started perishing, but awareness came much later. These forests need to be protected. So America made very large national parks. In Mexico, large national parks. South America, several of them. And most of them are mountain areas. And in national parks, nobody should live. No human. It is close to humans except for touring starting. But what happens in the course of years? Dry wood, fallen timber, fallen wood, fallen leaves, all plant parts pile up to several feet, and then once they catch fire, the embers fly into the skies and reach hundreds of meters away, starting more and more fires, and that is what's happening in California state. Los Angeles almost burned. Or more than 1 lakh people had to leave their homes and run away. And similarly, where all fires are happening in this hotspot, I made an effort to find out. You see, out of these 36 biodiversity hotspots, 28 are in mountains and forests, and 28 of them have, 26 or 25 of them have fire as a major threat. But you come to Western Ghat, you don't find that kind of fire. Only in the rain, shadow, or rainfall area, there will be some fire, which is also under national parks, like Bandipur. So where fire, forest department has to go and extinguish. But in these other forests, even if fire burns, it will enter a valley and find there is agriculture there is a rice field, and there is some Arika Tota, there's a Arika nut garden, the fire stops there. So these South and South Asian cultures have their deities also in the forest. So that's why you find Indo-Burma region, then Western Ghats Sri Lanka region, fire is not such a big problem. So you see all these Andes mountains, Brazilian mountains, these are the names of biodiversity hotspots. They are all in great dangers. So this should open our eyes, and we should the the governments should understand that the local people, the village communities, are to be taken partners in forest management. At least peripheral forest, village forest, should be managed by the village communities in collaboration with the forest department, and that will be sustainable management, that will be responsible management. That is what also the Biodiversity Act of India says. Biodiversity Act says every village, whether forest village or municipality or anything, there should be a biodiversity management committee, and that is having supreme power in managing biodiversity. Any biodiversity element commercially taken from the jurisdiction of that panchayat or from the municipality, that has to be accounted by the village this thing, biodiversity management committee, but it is hardly done. So this Biodiversity Act is almost a failure because the provisions are not much studied and no one is much there management committees. So see, the giant sequoias, redwood, I happened to visit these areas along with Professor Donald Hughes, the famous environmental historian of the world. And we have a few papers together, and he himself took me to these Mariposa Grove, giant sequoias in California forest, and he explained that there are also relics of community occupation of those areas, like various tribes. But the European colonies destroyed native cultures and biodiversity. The religions also got changed, and I'm so glad Professor Madhav Gadgil, who initiated the studies on Halkar forest and also in Abhinashini estuary. He started organized studies, and then afterwards the team under the leadership of Dr. TVRAMACHANDRA, continuing that lineage, that heritage, and so Padma Bhushan, Professor Madhav Gadgil was awarded United Nations Champion of the Earth 2024, and he contributed substantially for Halkar forest, celebrating its centenary. He was very much after that, but personally he was not in a position to attend. So thanks to Dr. Ramchandra especially and Dr. Nagaratna for their interest and contributions to Halkar studies ongoing, and also to the study of Ramsar site, constantly encouraging team. Thank you very much for your patient hearing. Thank you. So any discussion, are most welcome.
Thank you so much, sir. We have learned so much from you, from forest conservation to human intervention, like the Khan forest in, like also Great Lakes in Karnataka, as well as you mentioned how the forests are the two sources of water in these regions. And you have also focused on the significance of these sacred groves in conserving the ecosystem and the biodiversity. And also you have identified and focused on the forest fires and, around the world, and how Western Ghats and the Eastern Asian forests are safe from that. How is because of the social aspect these areas as well. So now we'll take some questions from the participants. There are some questions, sir. First, question is from Karthik. He has also appreciated it was amazing and interesting this. The question is, kindly share your views. How do we prevent wildfires in Uttarakhand forest?
Checking wildfires in Uttarakhand forest. That's the question.
Yes.
Yeah, I think, see, Uttarakhand forest had a lot of this village, what you call one panchayats formed under Indian Forest Act of 1927, but most of them have become inactive. So now they have to pick up Zoamoto under the leadership of NGOs, youth, spirited people who want to conserve environment. If they want to start grassroots level work, they should start from the villages of Uttarakhand and Uttaranchal and restore village forest, what you call Aranya Panchayat, one Panchayat, or equivalent body has to be formed. But one Panchayat is already constitutionally valid, and it would be better the people take initiative in rejuvenating one Panchayat system. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. If anyone has any question, they can switch on their audio and they can also speak. Monica,
Yeah,
you
ma'am.
can, you are not
Yeah, yeah.
audible.
Yeah, yeah,
Can you
yeah.
speak,
Ma'am, can you
louder?
audible of me? Yeah.
You can fix your audio.
Can I audible?
One second, Monica. We'll fix it.
Yeah, yeah, ma'am.
You can speak your question.
Yeah, ma'am. Good evening, sir. Myself, Monica. I am from University of Mysore Research Scholar. Sir, here actually I great honor to listen or attend your lecture. And here my question is that about the California fire, forest fire. Actually, we are very well known currently for GIS and remote sensing technologies. So why we can't prevented or awareness on these forest fires even in developed countries also? So what is your comment or what is your knowledge you can share with me regarding this one?
Yeah, uh, precisely. It's a good question, but the point is, as I explained, these national parks, the Western ideal is untrammeled wilderness. Sorry, I have a little throat problem, but I think
It's okay, sir.
you can hear. Untrammeled wilderness means wilderness that is pristine. The government wanted pristine wilderness, thousands of kilometers. So now that is being, that concept is rudely shaken by the wildfires. So this can be controlled only by bringing back people in small clusters should be given permission to occupy favorable areas for agriculture and some small scale industries like that, no? But so it should be, landscape has to be converted into a landscape mosaic. So some small cattle ranges, farms, then forests where people can collect some biomass, like cut small trees for timber. The thing is, there need to be breaking the continuity of the forest, uniform kind of forest, because once this uniform kind of forest catch fire, it is nobody can control. It's only rains have to come and douse the fire, as it is hopefully happening in Los Angeles today. Rains are expected or already started. So therefore, this requires a revolution in thinking, in policy. Otherwise, it will be too disastrous, not only for California, but all of the biodiversity hotspots and all of the world.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Yes, yes, I have another question about sacred cons and all. You told about those are the evergreens, but why we can't develop those cons, sacred for cons into the other forest areas? So then we can avoid the forest fires. No, that's why we are can't develop those things currently in the situation.
That's a really very good suggestion. But the thing is, what is in the good can? They are more endemic species. They are highly sensitive species with broad leaves, and also they are more shallow rooted with butters, with the stilt roots, and with large seed, shade loving. The large seed germinate, it forms a tall seedling, tall sapling, and it should have shade. If it is open, that dies. So
Yes.
therefore, this particular uh, objective is to be achieved in stages. First, we have to start replanting with tolerant evergreens, not uh, sensitive evergreens, which are present in high evergreen forest. What are the tolerant evergreens? They are the evergreens present all over India or even Indo-Malaysia, like that. For example, Nirle tree, like Jamun tree, it's present all over India. Mango tree, all over India it is there. And similarly, uh, Mimosops tree, Pongamia tree, such trees are to be introduced first, which are tolerant evergreens. And then, as the canopy darkens in course of time, you can introduce next level of trees. So even the forest nurseries, departmental nurseries should have special sections. Section meant for replanting in open forest. Then up to 20% shaded forest, up to 50% shaded forest, up to 80% shaded forest. So there should be a grade of saplings in different sectors, and they should be planted according to after surveying the nature of the forest which is to be regenerated. So otherwise, it will be a disaster planting any species indiscriminately as it is going on now. So it is also
Yes.
a colossal expenditure on the part of the forest department to waste money on. Even in Halkar forest, we saw many species planted in the dark shade which should not have been planted there. That was done by the department. So
Yes.
there should be a plan, and that plan requires also very experienced foresters, experienced silviculturists, especially. Thank you.
Hmm. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Sir, actually, shall I ask one thing? What is your comment on forest and industrialization? Like, as you spoke about laterites, mines, and all you told, right? So, when it is availability of any mineral or any mines, so obviously, industrialization will be developed by automatically government. It will initiate by government. So, how come we can avoid to damage the forest for with respect of development in the India like a country? So we know that we have 24% of coverage of forest is there, even though we are struggling with some other to protective or making some such efforts. But when we through the GIS or any mapping, we can know the original forest cover exactly in India. It is very minimal to the 24%. That's what I know. So, what your comment on forest versus industrialization?
Yeah, forest and civilization should coexist.
Yes.
So, how this can coexist? First, we have to demarcate watershed areas in the forest, which are the prime watershed areas, which is drained by streams and perennially flowing. So, or giving sustaining perenniality in wells, in the ponds, lakes, like that. No, that forest is not to be tampered with. You cannot do anything to that because water in the small village also, the water in olden days was considered sacred, tirtha. So for Tirtha, we need not be going to Ganga or Yamuna every time. Every village has a source of tirtha where there are deities. So you must learn to respect the village deities. Where are the deities today? So when the forest is cut for plywood and all, the deities also vanish or the deities retire, and they are actually given puja once in a year, something like that, with some chicken and yeah, some coconut breaking and all. That is happening in many of the sacred groves which we studied. So we have to prime watershed area, then prime biodiversity area, biodiversity of especially sensitive species like amphibians, endemic fishes, then endemic trees where congregations of endemic plants are there, endemic trees are there. They are to be demarcated. That's why Madhav Gadgil Committee, Kasturi Rangan Committee, all these worked on these lines. But now what we need is at a micro level, not in a mega level, at least in a micro level, if the village communities take interest, their forests can be protected. The communities can lead because we are all perishing due to climate change and plastics and pollution and all that. No, so instead of that, we all can come together and make plans. Forest-wise, we need to take decentralized management systems.
Yeah.
And that is what even UN is advocating. Same thing.
Yes.
Getting indigenous communities in forest management. Thank
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Good evening, sir. This is Dr. Ranjita Savaikar from Goa. Thank you for a wonderful session, sir. I have a small question here. How can machine learning help to detect the illegal activities in forest? This is my first question. And can technology prevent the forest fires? Can we take help of modern technology?
Technologies, the imageries are constantly monitored, and where a gap is happening in the forest due to a fire or a clearance, that is immediately detected and stored. But to utilize the particular forest divisions and range officers, they should also be monitoring what are the changes happening. That will be full dedication. Even small level changes need to be accounted for. So technology has to be used for detecting these things, and then illegality can be controlled by application of Biodiversity Act. For example, if the Garcinia is collected by a contractor from a forest, who collects that today? Contractor employs the village forest committee, not village panchayat, village VFC. VFC is a creation of the forest department. So VFC collects the this what you call kokum or Garcinia gomiguta, upage it's called in Kannada. And these are collected in quintals and they give to the contractor. Contractor pays them. So they are bypassing the biodiversity management committee. So biodiversity management committee, 99% of them do not know what their powers are. And their powers are kept hidden. If they know their legal jurisdiction, the one panchayat means that panchayat also encloses forest, which is there. It is not only limited to roadside and field, but the panchayat biodiversity management committee has jurisdiction on the revenue boundary. So therefore, any collection there, this committee can decide whether to collect, whether not to collect. This is endangered. For example, Ashoka, Saraka indica, is very endangered. So therefore, we have to stop for 10 years. This committee can take a decision. This committee can pass a resolution and hand over to forest department. So we don't permit this in our jurisdiction. But the panchayat takes the lead. So I think
Okay.
people like you can work with your nearby panchayats, give them awareness, and see such a step is taken for one or two resorts, braving the forest contractor lobby, but nevertheless, the name will be remembered for long for
Yes.
taking this initiative. This is a movement to rejuvenate the biodiversity management committees. That is
Yes.
very essential. It's a very good act, but unfortunately, it is going like a vestigial organ of the government. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Any more questions from the participants?
Hello. Hello. I think probably no more questions. So nice hearing uh, such a such a patient hearing for a long time, and I hope I was audible enough despite a bad throat. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for your scientific knowledge sharing with us. And thank you for participants for your active support and your many questions.
Thank you so much.
Now I would like to ask and request TVS sir to conclude the session. Am I audible? Now I would like to request TVS sir for concluding the session. Thank you. Okay, TVS sir is in last. So thank you so much, sir, for reaching out participant with focus on what the taught us today. Would very much like for you to join with us with our YouTube channel. Please see our videos in this IISc channel. And for upcoming webinars like this, please follow our websites of www.iisc.ac.in. Thank you so much. Thank you.